welcome.
From Denmark? Who is that?
We've actually put this together. Must know about the projects.
Good afternoon. You can hear me okay? All right. Thank you, everyone in this room. It's the last session, one of the last sessions of the day. I know that some of us are probably feeling a little bit tired, and we've had a lot of inspiring talks already, but I think that this one should bring a lot together from different discussions that we've had and synthesize a few core messages. I'm not going to do a Slido. I thought I would, but I just would ask for a quick show of hands. Who has been in a session already today on whole life carbon and circularity or sufficiency? Okay, so my Slidos definitely we don't need them now, I think. So my name is Caroline Milne. I'm head of communications at BPIE. And I'm just going to introduce very quickly what we're going to do. Today is really going to be, this session will be a storytelling session, I'd like to say. My colleague, Jolt Toth, who is team lead at BPIE, working on whole life carbon, will do a bit of scene setting on the regulatory framework across the globe, basically lessons learned. Then we're going to have two panels with some rapid fire discussions, and everyone is going to tell their own stories of on the ground setting up solutions to track, measure whole life carbon emissions and the lessons they've learned along the way, and what is needed to actually scale up now. What do we need from research, innovation, capacity building to bring these solutions to life, to make them accelerate? We all know how much work is to be done over the next 6 years, so this is really going to be about exactly that. So without further ado, I'm going to give the floor over to my colleague, Jolt.
That's great. Thank you, Caroline. And hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I just wanted to follow up exactly on the same thought, because I don't know how you feel, but I feel it incrementally more difficult to come with any new ideas. But I was always reminded at school that repetition is actually not such a bad thing in order for us to fix exactly the key messages, the key outcomes of the day-to-day. But so for just as a start, I'm just going to kick off with a statement. We are talking with digital tools, we are talking about innovation and research. I think all these need a clear purpose. So we need a clear direction for innovation, for research, for digital tools, and these need to be directed where it matters the most. And that means where the highest potential to cut carbon emissions are, but also the need for the highest carbon emissions are. So you have seen this slide many times, but again, when we're looking at what are the opportunities to cut carbon emissions and the most urgent need to do that, we need to put this in a time horizon. That means that when we are looking to the remaining time to 2050, that a lot of the emissions are going to be in the form of upfront emissions, and actually there is a high chance with the increase of new constructions that these will be actually the dominating source of carbon emissions across the world. And very importantly, when we are talking about the balance or the dynamics of embodied or operational emissions, climate change and climate change mitigation doesn't actually care about the individual building level. What matters from a climate change perspective is actually the building stock emissions. So when we look at these, it's not just about the carbon intensity of the grid or the energy efficiency of the stock, but very importantly also just the floor area, the size of the stock which is going to be heated, the existing ones or the new ones which are going to be constructed. So and also the same thing in terms of embodied emissions. Now, what I can say is that we were fairly good in terms of addressing some of the demands and material and energy side policies, and equally also quite good in terms of addressing embodied emissions of the materials through various decarbonization of the industry side of policies. However, I just wanted to put this up because clearly to illustrate, there are also, I think, just simply opportunities to go further. There are gaps which have not yet been fully leveraged, neither by policy nor by market innovation. And most of these are in the spectrum of sufficiency, so essentially reducing demand for materials, reducing demand for construction, reducing demand for buildings. Also, a lot is going to be talked about how to harness data and whole life carbon to essentially drive design for this, and a lot how to deal with the traceability and the circularity of materials, essentially just to use better what is already out there. So this is a illustration of from Europe, probably the most comprehensive and widest in scope of the current trends in terms of baseline of building stock emissions and also trends towards 2050. And these were based on a technical study that we've done together with Ramboll and KU Leuven in preparation of a whole life carbon roadmap for the European Union. And one of the key messages here that is what you see, that if we don't push further, then actually we fall quite a bit short in terms of 2050 carbon targets. Now, very importantly, it's also that some of the efficiency gains, that because we have robust policies in Europe at least in place already, but some of these gains that we are expecting from these existing policies are going to actually be offset by the increase of the floor area, so essentially by the increase of embodied carbon. Now, this shouldn't necessarily be our framework, or this shouldn't necessarily be our scenario in going forward to 2050. Very importantly, there are solutions available, and this is the categorization of the various solutions available as it has been done by the EPCC last year. We just added a number of concrete measures where we believe also innovation research should be guiding. So this is not just about leveraging, which we've done quite well in terms of the renewable and energy efficiency or operational efficiency side, but it's also about the demand reduction side. So one of the key questions for the panel today will be actually how can we better leverage more like, if you like, the sufficiency measures. So some preliminary points to be picked up by the speakers and the panelists later on. Essentially, this is no nonsense. Start with a focus on the indicators and impact categories that are the most relevant for the construction sector. This is about aiming for simplicity, but also focusing on the ones which the sector is responsible for or the sector can act upon. Now, in terms of managing the complexity that we have been hearing about all day, is the simple solution for the beginning at least is to limit the number of the indicators to streamline the decision-making and minimizing confusion, while effectively also highlighting the potential trade-offs, because these are very important, not just among the environmental objectives, but also potentially looking at the social costs of the climate change transition. Then finally, two more. So the last panel I attended was about data and digital tools, and this was also very clearly articulated already. Again, the point of focusing, or start at least with focusing on what makes a difference. So in some countries of the global south, this a lot probably will be about new construction, because simply this is where population growth and therefore construction is going to be expected. While we also heard about the fact that in the northern parts, which are fully built, renovation and the better use of the existing building stock is going to be a priority. Because if we look existing research in terms of embodied carbon, these have been almost exclusively focusing on new constructions. We simply don't know yet how we are going to better renovate, but also not just in an operational improvement perspective, but also just to make it renovations low carbon. So start developing with common data infrastructure in collaboration. And a number of excellent tools have been already presented throughout the day, but I think these are some of the topics that the fellow panelists will talk about later on.
Thank you, Zsolt. So this fits nicely now with the next and our first panel. I've called it the practitioner's perspective, but in reality, everyone today is a practitioner. But we're really looking at maybe a few on the ground solutions, whether it be technology, whether it be actually building the building itself and working with local building materials. So we're going to start with Marta Bouchard, who will present. She's AEC Sustainability Lead at global technology firm Autodesk. AEC stands for Architecture, Engineering, and Construction. And then we'll go on to Moses Itanola, who is representing BIM Africa. BIM Africa is an NGO, and they are really promoting the use of BIM all across Africa. So we're really looking at someone who's trying to push for an uptake of specific technologies. And then we'll hear from Kelly Alvarez Duran, he wears many hats. He's co-founder of Half Climate Design. He is an architect. He is also a professor of architecture. He's a director of the Half Research Design Studio at the University of Toronto, senior fellow at Architecture 2030. And he's given me many titles. It was really hard to choose. So without further ado, I'll invite Marta up to the stage, and then you can just sit down. Actually, no, sorry. I'm inviting all of our panelists to the stage, and you can take a seat.
Thank you.
And then Marta, you can kick us off. Great. The floor is yours. Thanks. Thank you.
I don't know what slide's next, so I'm really excited. Okay, I actually want to go back because what I wanted to do was introduce myself before it jumped into animations. You'll be enticed and not have to look at me with some animated slides today. My name is Marta. I work for Autodesk. We're a technology company. I lead our sustainability strategy for our products. So Autodesk is a company that makes many different types of products, but our customers design and make the world. And what I mean by that is we're one company. We have a product and platform ecosystem that is used by millions of people to make products, places, and experiences that impact billions of people, probably all of you in this room. And so not many companies have the privilege and opportunity to influence all of these makers to make a better world. And we do. And that's why we have the opportunity today to speak about what's happening in the technology space. So we're in the midst of a global revolution when it comes to digital technology. All of us have lived through this in our lifetimes. And when it comes to the built environment, the AEC space where we are talking today, there's been a rapid evolution in the technology just for this industry. It's evolved from paper to digital. We've moved from CAD to BIM, and the future of design is connected data, connected teams, and, don't blink, generative AI. This is happening, and I'm proud to work for a company that's working on this, but herein lies the opportunity for all of us to deliver on our sustainability commitments. The technology space creates a digital foundation in which we can decarbonize. And I'm here to advocate for the fact that these tools can and must be leveraged in order to take advantage of this digital ecosystem, connect our data, and connect all of the stakeholders, all of our teams, in order to address whole life carbon emissions in the built environment. told you there'd be some animations here. So sit tight. Oh, hold on. Don't get excited. I got to go back one. This is a little bit slow to respond. Give me a minute. Okay. Let's start with BIM, Building Information Models. And you're going to hear about this a lot, and I'm really pleased that some of the panelists today are going to show you some examples of this. Building information models are an opportunity to really bring together the not just the design of a built environment asset, but actually all the folks that are contributors to the data ecosystem. So they're more than just geometrical representations that tell someone how to, design a building. They are representations of multi-dimensional interactive building physics, and they can accommodate analysis of environmental conditions. So real-world dynamics of solar effects. What's not playing here is an animation of, I'm sorry that that's not working, an animation of a BIM model that is being assessed for the effects of solar radiation on the facade design. This is one of countless ways in which technology can be used as a design tool to assess the trade-offs and decision-making of the different outcomes. So BIM enables an integrated design analysis, these decision-making opportunities, and when it comes to sustainability, it can be leveraged across the life cycle. It is evolving now into the next generation of technology that is often called digital twins, and that becomes an ongoing, living, breathing digital representation, and more often a real-life, real-time, connected ability to measure and manage an asset during the operations phase. So we are truly connecting the life cycle of the built environment. Okay. When you consider all of the elements of a building, and I love this because it's just the tip of the iceberg of how much goes into a building, there are thousands of components, and every component has a carbon footprint. The means and methods, the extraction, the logistics, the assembly on site, the renovation 20 years later when it's hit its end of use, its end of life, and it needs to be replaced. Every one of these steps has a digital footprint that affects carbon. And the value chain of all the players that affect that ecosystem, architects and engineers and planners, construction and trades, the manufacturers and the suppliers of this material, and the asset owners, the folks that end up owning these buildings, renovating these buildings, they are all contributing to the data footprint that might be tracked and captured to create a kind of footprint of its lifetime. So we all are contributing to this digital ecosystem, and as we design and renovate and operate these buildings, together with technology, it's still evolving, the idea is that it can be a repository of building data for our whole life cycle emissions process. So we have today, this is it, the technology for building analysis and a growing sea of data. So if we want to manage and mitigate carbon, we have to measure our starting point. We're here now, we have this technology, and the latest advances in design and construction tools can analyze operational carbon, they can analyze embodied carbon, we can put those things together, we can visualize the trade-offs, we can get real-time feedback right here in these design tools. We can get the feedback to make design decisions. And with this, we're building data sets, we're creating reports, and therefore we're creating new benchmarks in order to measure what does good look like. Does anyone actually know? No, we are working towards that, but this is the foundation for which that can happen. So we're creating new informed data, and this is the basis that can create the indicators and the benchmarks upon which we, as designers and planners and policymakers, can start to act. I'm going to give you some examples of how to leverage technology for innovation. First, Lake Flato Architects. They're a firm that integrates building performance analysis and life cycle analysis tools to reduce carbon. For example, they did this hotel where they used design tools to reduce the structural impacts by 38 to 58% embodied carbon because they found the benefits of using a mass timber structure. Using BIM to reduce embodied carbon. Warren & Mahoney, architecture firm out of New Zealand, they integrate BIM technologies with life cycle analysis tools. They have a firm-wide commitment to reduce their entire project portfolio to net zero by 2030, which is targeting a 40% reduction in embodied carbon by using these tools on every single project. And in Glasgow, this is a water story. The Smart Canal, which is smart because of digital tools, they've installed sensors together with rainfall data to manage the water flows, so when big storms are coming, they can predict the effects on the community. They can reduce the water consumption, they can open the locks, let the water flows adjust. And by way of doing this, they have mitigated 5,000 tons of carbon by not building civil infrastructure to otherwise hold back the water. And lastly, I want to talk about the city of Oslo in Norway. The firm Multiconsult has been using BIM and 3D technologies for the renovation of their entire historic district, and they've demonstrated a 50% reduction compared to traditional building processes by using these technologies. I have so many more stories of how this is available today. So one of the takeaways I really hope you have today is that to achieve effective reduction in whole life carbon emissions, it depends on people, their processes, and technology. Buildings require so many complex multi-stakeholder processes. And so we know decarbonization is possible across the life cycle, across planning, designing, building, and operating. And that cycle starts all over again when we renovate our existing building stock. We can enable whole life carbon practices by connecting the design build tools together with open data. There's a lot of folks here today talking about this data ecosystem. Technology is the way in which we make that data open and connected. So the way we can manage and measure our carbon emissions is with the right data. And we need to democratize this technology. This is not just for the specialists and the experts in the world. We need to put forward programs and opportunities to democratize the technology and able to turn that data into impact and better outcomes. And lastly, I think as the stakeholders of this event here in Paris, if we take this holistic approach to buildings and to whole life carbon, we can together make a real impact. I'll hand it over now to Moses. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Moses Itonla from BIM Africa. It's interesting to share the panel with Autodex, a global corporation. We are a civil society organization, and we're a civil society organization across the African continent, advancing the adoption of digital technologies, some of which Autodex, for example, produces. And this is to ensure that across the continent, we can drive sustainable buildings, the use of these innovations and digital technologies to drive sustainable buildings across the continent. I'm going to tell a story of my continent because as a proud African, I want to tell the story of what the African continent contributes. Today at the launch of the Global Status Report, it was interesting to see Oliver talk about his concerns about the low adoption, the low passing of NDCs across major African countries. This is a continent that is diverse, complex, includes a lot of countries, up to about 54 recognized by the United Nations, but contributes less than 4% to carbon emissions across the globe. Yet, despite this very little contribution, 7 of 10 countries at the risk of climate impact are located within Africa. And so across the Horn of Africa, down to the western coast, to all areas of the continent, we see the impact of climate ravaging. But these then present an opportunity. We still have massive urbanization that is going to happen within our continent, because as of now, 70% of buildings that will exist by 2040 are yet to be built. And so that's a massive demand, and that's a massive challenge for the continent to leapfrog and deploy the use of technology to adopt low carbon construction, which is what the panel is about. And so I'll be telling stories of some of the projects and solutions that across the continent has been adopting digital innovations to ensure low carbon construction. And the first one is the official Telfair development in Mauritius. This project was featured in the African BIM report produced by BIM Africa, and is the development of 37,000 office spaces meter square of office spaces in a mixed-use large development. And the project was featured in the African BIM report by Pro Design, which is a member of our network, and they are a BIM consultant and a sustainability consultant. And using digital technologies like BIM, they were able to drive sustainable development of the mixed-use projects. It achieved less than 30. It achieved a reduction of 34% of carbon in the project. The project also deployed the use of circularity by ensuring that materials excavated from the ground are reused, a resource efficiency. Water use is also optimized. And through the use of BIM, they were able to develop a sustainable project. And this aligns with the Building Breakthrough recommendations, BBT4, that companies should begin to deploy technology, such as digital technologies, to advance low-carbon construction across this continent. And the next case study is also a collaboration, because the Building Breakthrough recommendation number 4 also recommended that there should be the use of pilot case studies to test new technologies. And we see a collaboration between 3 companies, Empower, Casa Real, and Easy Housing. Empower is a blockchain finance institution that focuses on affordable housing markets. Casa Real is an housing developer in Mozambique, a region affected by disasters. Cyclone has hit Mozambique multiple times. And we have Easy Housing that deploys timber solutions, sustainable timber to build housing. And these 3 parties came together to form a collaboration and do a pilot project in Mozambique, in Beira, to deploy blockchain financing to finance an affordable housing project using sustainable timber. Through this pilot scheme, the companies were able to then scale up and then deploy even more sustainable housing across the continent to, of course, reduce low carbon impact and even address the affordable housing gap in Beira. And we also see a recommendation from Building Breakthrough 5 saying that countries should also develop capacity to ensure that education and the necessary skills to advance low-tech construction is maximized. And a case study for that is the UM6P SAP+D in Morocco, which is an institution that develops a lot of research in this sector and tries to also advance educational skills and capacity training programs that focus on energy efficiency. They have a master's in energy efficient buildings. These are innovative ideas within the continent, and they serve as an inaugural attempt by the continent to advance low carbon construction. We see also many charts, like I said in the morning, Oliver presented one. We see many charts that highlight the gap for solutions across Africa. Here's a report that shows the number of low buildings or net zero buildings across the globe as of 2020, and we see that these do not exist in Africa. The Global Status Report 2022, however, highlighted some green building projects across the African continent, and that's an interesting development that needs to be focused on. We also see solutions, a lot of the global solutions Autodesk just presented, many others across the globe, are not African built. And so sometimes we see that the data do not understand the context of the continent in which we operate. Sometimes we see that some of even the pricing model and the framework do not integrate with the structure of the continent, the business environment in Africa, where people struggle with, for example, buying software licenses in US dollars because it's significantly higher than their local currency. Their businesses are conducted in their local currency, and they have to acquire tools and solutions that are priced in a different currency. And so this creates a huge challenge for the continent to adopt digital solutions. And so our own recommendation, looking through all of this, is that more solutions need to be built out of our continent that understand and agree with the context in which we operate in. Of course, a large support needs to come from the government and corporate entities also. Government needs to begin to deploy policies and tax frameworks that encourage the development of indigenous solutions. We're also looking forward to synergic collaboration between the academia and the industry to try to upscale the use of indigenous research and innovation. And also, we are very happy to have partnership with the Global North. I've seen a lot of conversations of companies trying to penetrate the market. But one thing needs to be focused, and that's self-sufficiency and the building of technical capacity in our continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Moses. I'm gonna stay in Africa. I'm a Canadian architect, and I learned everything about the future of architecture in Rwanda. I don't know, that missing slew of slides right to that. I've got a whole section of my slides not there. Any idea? Okay. Did they get cut? Okay, well, I mean, never mind what I just said, because I'm not going to be able to talk to it. Well, what's that? I don't know how to address this. Okay, well, I guess we can just move on. I was going to show you the world's first climate positive project in Rwanda and the massive gap in data that exists in EPDs. I think that the tools that we're showing, we've been working with Autodesk tools now for a decade, free of charge through the Autodesk Foundation. And underpinning all this data, all these tools is the necessary data, EPDs, to be able to aggregate the information, the environmental product declarations of materials. Now, as in slides, what we found pretty quickly in practicing in places like Rwanda and Nigeria is there's almost no EPDs in Africa currently. I don't know if this is, if we're going to revise these here, maybe I might get lucky. But that the lack of that basic material data and the cost of entry for the creation of EPDs, I don't know. No idea? Okay, well, I'm just going to have to speak to it and improvise. I think we should just pause because we're missing like 15 slides here. So maybe we can come back to it, or I can send them back to you. I don't know. I have it on an email.
Shall we?
Yeah.
No, he's bringing one.
No problem. I have them right here.
Can I maybe ask while they're fixing it? So you mentioned some of the places in Africa, but are there like areas where it's most where should you look for something in African continent? Where is there a lot of momentum?
Regarding digital technologies?
In the different countries, maybe cities, are there pioneer tools or maybe
Oh, definitely. There's South Africa, there's Egypt to look to. Okay.
Why don't you repeat the question?
She's asked that.
No, to the mic.
Oh, okay. So, well, she's just recommended that perhaps maybe we get into some questions while it's being resolved. And she's asked the question that across the region, are there areas of interest where perhaps there are outliers and there already momentum is being built and easy solutions areas where you can plug into? Yes, definitely. The growth of the continent differs. We've had innovative solutions come out of countries like South Africa, like Egypt, Morocco that I mentioned, for example. The government has advanced a lot of policies that helps to advance digital technologies. The university that I listed is located within the Green Energy Park and is a smart city that is funded entirely by a government-owned institution, the OCP company. And so we see that there are already countries building momentum in trying to deploy policies and an enabling framework for startups and products and new technologies to advance. But of course, like I said, it's a continent filled with 54 countries, each with diverse context and approach to solving problems. So in a general view, a lot of work needs to be done, but we have outliers, we have countries that are doing fantastic work. South Africa, like I mentioned, is very, very advanced in deploying digital technologies in construction projects to advance low tech. Mauritius, which is a country featured in my report, still has a lot of growth to happen. There's a lot of urbanization going on. And so these are fertile areas where these kind of technologies can be easily deployed and it can help scale low carbon construction.
Thanks, Moses. So we're dealing with Kelly's slides. I'm very sorry about the issue, but we'll take care of that. And so in the meantime, I just have a couple questions for both of you, so we don't lose too much time. Marta, you mentioned at the very end of your presentation the term that I've heard quite a lot, democratizing the technology. What do you mean by that?
I don't work in that department. I don't work in the pricing department. The big business models there. But I think, yeah, this is, I think, a really important opportunity for us to recognize this idea of democratizing technology. You may be surprised to learn that I'm not a technologist. I actually spent most of my career in professional practice. I was just a user of technology. And for me, I'm really passionate about sustainability and being able to design low carbon buildings and the built environment. And having worked as a practitioner, one building at a time just wasn't enough. And so the reason I came to Autodesk is to do exactly that, to try to make these tools more accessible and more embedded into everyday workflows. So when we say democratizing technology, and specifically in the spirit of this forum, the opportunity is to upskill and position our industry to be able to use these tools. This can be global. This is not for, first world countries and, what we call the established North. We've had a lot of conversations this week around like global North and global South. The opportunity to democratize technology is as simple as putting in place some programs and some incentives to get the skills out to a wider audience. There are so many practitioners that have some degree of technology, and there is an enormous generation of people coming into this field that are quick to learn. They've grown up in this digital revolution. They are so ready to grab onto it. So I really believe that by putting together programs, there may be some incentives that need to be coming through there. You mentioned tax frameworks. I love that concept. I jotted that down because I thought, yeah, there are so many ways we can upskill our people and get technology. Actually, Kelly mentioned the Autodesk Foundation. That is a mechanism that Autodesk often uses to get technology into the hands of otherwise, industries and communities that might not have access to technology. And we do that in order to democratize. So,
okay, thanks a lot. And Moses, you mentioned the enabling environment. And I think that you're both driving at the same thing ultimately, but can you explain to me a little bit more what the enabling environment looks like and who's driving that?
So currently, we see that many African governments do not have necessary frameworks or policies that support the development of startups and innovation within the continent. We've seen, for example, public offices churn out policies that in the medium term have damning effects on innovation and startups and technology companies. And so the concept is that because many of them do not have an adequate understanding of the requirements that are needed to upscale these kind of solutions, they just on the surface look at products and try to just put up policies that have damning effect on their immediate success. And so that's why you see that companies start up within the continent, and over a period of time, they don't last long because there are no necessary frameworks to support the growth, the teething phase of that solution. And so that's why it's a necessary requirement that policymakers, corporate organizations, if perhaps maybe that's a top approach, from down up, corporate organizations provide necessary support and enabling environment for these solutions to be developed. One of it I mentioned earlier is tax frameworks that support innovation. We've seen this happen in many other regions where the government provide necessary tax incentive for startups and technology companies to be able to have a breathing space and build their solutions. Also, some of it is the currency volatility. It's a significant conversation across the continent, and because some of the products and the tools they need to advance their solutions require many foreign companies. So we've seen issues with buying, for example, databases from Oracle, buying tools like Autodesk from a lot of other global companies. In the pricing framework, we realized that the continent cannot afford to pay it on a consistent basis because those tools are priced in a way higher value than their local currency. And their users are local users who pay in their local currency. And so that becomes a huge issue for many companies. We've seen instances where foreign investors even back away from for the continent because at the point of their investment and at the point of their exit, there's been a significant shift in in currency value. And so it's difficult, even if you've made profit or you've made gains with the investment that you've brought into the continent, at the point of exit, it's no longer the same value because without doing anything, the money has depreciated right there in your purse. So those are part of the frameworks that the government needs to pay attention to ensure that indigenous solutions, startup companies can begin to grow. And interestingly, we are seeing success across other sectors, like the financial sectors. We are beginning to see unicorns come out of the continent, but the construction sector is still very traditional, and so a lot of attention needs to come to that sector. And
Thank you,
hopefully we'll
Moses.
achieve growth.
Thank you so much. And now it's time for Kelly to have his moment.
I hope this is worth it, yeah. Okay, well, yeah, as mentioned, I learned everything about embodied carbon in Africa, and it was this project, I think, really was the culmination of a focus, a ruthless focus on whole life carbon, working with the Howard Buffett Foundation, with Arup, when I was the director of Mass Design Group. We built this ground-up university in Rwanda that completed last year. From the beginning, we were focused on how can we, hire as many people with this project in the country. 98% of the project sourced within 100 miles, and you begin to see some of the craftspeople and contractors we worked with. But for today, I want to talk mostly about embodied carbon and the material realities of this. We sourced 96% of the project's material inside Rwanda, a country smaller than the Netherlands, smaller than Connecticut, without its own mineral resources. And we did that, and there's that slide I alluded to earlier. We're doing the kind of accounting for carbon in a part of a world. You put the map that Moses shared too. The one I'm sharing, is a few years old now. His is up to date, a complete dearth of data. And so we did the first EPD in the country. We worked with the domestic, the large brick factory that made our ceramic tile roofs, from quarry to kiln, really understanding all of the inputs along the way to make the first EPD in the country. And that data, that data rolling up into this, which is our assessment of limiting cement and steel as much as we possibly could. This business as usual on the left and RECA on the right. And the two things that were the big reductions, this 58% reduction, were moving from steel spanning structures to wood and going from reinforced concrete footings to stone foundations, the largest single decision. Now, when we wanted to be in the whole life assessment beyond just the buildings, this is a ground up campus, so working with Arup and Atelier 10, we did a complete accounting of all the civil infrastructure as well. Interesting, the solar power array and its battery, its footprint, it would take 15 years of generation to offset itself. It only has a 16-year warranty. But we also developed a 40-hectare afforestation plan on this campus. As you can see, we had a very generous campus, and by planting 40 hectares, we think this could be Africa's, if not the world's, truly climate-positive project by on-site sequestration, and only made possible with a real focus up front on reducing embodied carbon as much as possible. Okay, now on the back of this, in the absence of tools, the Mass Design Group, my former firm, just put this out, which is basically a very simple how-to. This was with it's an open source. It's on Mass's website. How to do embodied carbon calculations in places like Rwanda. It's just a spreadsheet. It's pretty simple. I took this knowledge and thought, well, okay, this is how we do it in Rwanda. And looking back at my home country of Canada, seeing a complete lack of action around this issue. So, aside from teaching at University of Toronto, developing data, I've been working with the City of Toronto recently and co-authored the first embodied carbon targets in North America. Now, in the process of that, it was having to work with the AEC community, with the manufacturing sector, with the development community, and with planners and regulators. And across the board, everybody said, be more ambitious. We can go further. The city said, wow, geez, we're having a real pickle today. The city said, what would it mean for us if we set embodied carbon targets? We build buildings. Could we hit them? And so, great question. So working with the city, we did a life cycle assessment of this. It's a parking garage for their ambulance fleet. And we came back and with the use of tools said, well, here's your hot spots, your XPS insulation, the paints, the epoxy coating on the slab. We think that simply through looking through a life cycle assessment, we found a few choices for them and just swapping their specification. And this is the real potency of life cycle assessment tools, is that it's, I was trained to go to the back wall to a catalog and find alternatives. These tools present them in your, like they're right there, and like, oh, I had no idea that this installation even exists. And so you can see we proposed 30% reduction and a few specification swaps at the end of construction documents, did not change dimensions, did not impact the design schedule, and did zero impact on the budget and the schedule of the project. The city instituted all of them. On the back of that built confidence that he said this is a policy, is completely achievable. It passed last spring, first city in North America with targets. Now, on the back of this, I work with architects, training them life cycle assessment. We need to get this it's in our tools. We need those tools in the hands of literate people who understand what that data means. It's not complicated. It's simple accounting for buildings. And so we've been working with architects across Canada, bringing them up to speed. Recently with Kiercor, we just completed a complete review of their master specification for multi-unit construction in Toronto. So here it is. This is what a building in Canada looks like right now. There are 625 unique items in a building, of which there's thousands of that item in the master spec. You can see a majority of them live in Division 7. 72% of those items do not have data. So Canada has as much of a data dearth right now as Africa does, I would argue. I actually think it's greater because we have way more stuff in our buildings, I'll say it put politely. And then of that, we only knew, where 41%, there's only, of all the things, 41% we had no idea where it comes from right now. So there's a massive gap in knowledge, and I'll leave with this, which is to say we need to get these tools into the hands of architects and engineers and develop their literacy now, including planners, and we have to close the data gap. We have to make EPDs cheaper and more easily providable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly, and thanks to all of you. So we have to move fast, but your story was really inspiring, also a bit terrifying to see the data gap that you mentioned. You're talking about literacy, carbon literacy, getting these tools into the hands of architects. Can you tell me a bit about the plans that I understood you have in Canada now?
Yeah, hopefully the government of Canada is going to contract me and a few people to go city to city this coming year and teach architects. And we need a rapid uptake in basic literacy and ability, and it needs to happen in the decision-making people in architecture firms. I teach students in a university. They're going to come out. They're the ones that are going to do the assessment and understand how to use the tools. But we need principals and partners of firms to have the basic grasp of this. It is so simple. And so I am, knock on wood, going to teach 2,000 architects this year, and we need that in every country right now.
It's ambitious.
Yeah.
And how do you incentivize these 2,000 architects to become carbon literate now?
Well, you provide that training for a low cost, and they have Con Ed requirements that they have to hit. But I think that the burden, earlier today, the gentleman from Ramboll mentioned the burden of this. It is additional costs. It's additional fees that someone needs to pay, and it's that's the client basically going to have to pay that. And I think that that's a reality. But I also think the flip side of this is that the reduced carbon building is actually less costly. That the greener building is also less expensive. That you find efficiencies in doing this, like the case that I just showed, 30% reduction in your greenhouse emissions for end of game. Doing this earlier in a project, you're going to find efficiencies in structure, in your material choices, and if you pair this up with your costing, you're going to have a lower cost project, full stop. So it's a very small amount of money to be spending to reduce both the cost and carbon of your project.
Thank you. Maybe just one final question or final thought. I think all three of you have really pointed to the role of regulators to create this environment that makes everyone want and have access to and want the technologies that collect the data, that get you the data that makes decisions, that makes the design, that makes the policies, that makes the tracking. So how do you think that policymakers can also maybe help communicate this better to the users, to the end users, who maybe just want a nice, comfy house to sleep in and nice kitchen? I'll ask you, Kelly.
That's a hard question to answer. I don't know. For me, embodied carbon is the doorway that opens up all the questions about where it comes from and how healthy it is for you and your family. And how regenerative or devastating it is for its ecosystems, where it came from, through whose hands it passes. And I think that increasingly we need to think about buildings the way we've been thinking about our food. We care where it comes from, we care what its impact is in the world, and I wish that we would care as much about our building materials and components as we do, the steak I might eat tonight, because I'll feel good about it at the end of today.
Yeah.
But, that's
Thank
what we
you.
need to do.
So maybe that's something for our policymakers, a new way to position even healthy buildings. It's, we have health campaigns for organic food and for our buildings as well. Thank you so much, and thank you for your patience again with the slides. I'm terribly sorry. Now I'm going to invite our next panel to come onto the stage. Now we have, it's moving very fast. So now we're bringing in again a set of solutions providers. You can come close to me. We have Helle Redder Momsen. Some of you may have just seen her in a previous panel. She's head of secretariat from the Nordic Sustainability Construction Program of the Nordic Council of Ministers. This is really a lighthouse project in Europe, in the world. They're very far advanced on their policies and their practices for accounting whole life carbon, and she has been leading this. So she has a wealth of knowledge and experience that she can transmit, that she can give advice on how to make this grow. So I'm very excited to hear from her. We'll have Vanderlei John, who coming now from Brazil. Vanderlei is a professor of building materials and at the Sustainable Construction Innovation Center at the University of Sao Paulo. And he has also driven the development of CDAC, which was also mentioned in a previous session, but he's going to go into detail on what this is. Basically, this is the simple whole life carbon database that in Brazil, it's a national database. And then finally, we have Anil Sawhney, who is head of sustainability at RICS, the Royal Institute for Chartered Surveyors, who is also going to be presenting whether it's policy or market initiatives, but really bringing us the global perspective of how to bring standardization and certification and capacity building and basically how to expand knowledge, I think, quickly. So we'll have Helle, please, the floor is yours first. Helle is actually going to tell us her story now of...
Wow. I'm coming there?
Yes. And you can have the...
Or you can fast one. Yeah, go ahead. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, and I really enjoyed the first presentation. I even liked the live thing about what's happening, and I think most of us really enjoyed that they came because they were really inspiring slides. So as you well presented, my name is Helle Redder Momsen. I work in the Danish Authority of Social Services and Housing, so that's where we do the Danish building regulation, and all the Nordic countries have come together because we're all working on how to implement and develop a whole life carbon regulation. So we have this program that it's not called Sustainability or Forum or something, it's called Nordic Sustainable Construction, just if you want to search for it once. And here we have come together, we worked together since 2021, on how can we accelerate this knowledge. Yes, because all the Nordic countries they know that we have to do something about our building stock, and it's a bit, I wouldn't call it easy, but it's a bit, it's possible to start with new buildings, because that's a clean sheet. So Sweden were the first to demand that you have to declare, you have to measure what is your climate impact from a building. Then came Norway half a year later, then came Denmark last year, January, and we sort of you don't just have to declare it, you don't just have to do the data and the math, there is a limit. So if you, we think it's really important, and that's what you can see from many of the other countries, that you have long-term planning so that there's a clear political signal. This is a road that we're taking, and we do it stepwise so that everyone gets to get that training and get to do the EPDs and have all that transition that has to happen, because we think that is actually also an important part of a transition, that it's, some will call it fair, some will call it with a focus on social as well. But of course, it should be ambitious. So to have long-term political planning, and in Denmark we have the limit. So when you build a building, Currently, if it's over 1,000 square meters, then it cannot emit more than what's equivalent to 12 kilograms CO2 per square meter. And that's right now being revisioned, and it's very soon going to political negotiation, and it will be even more ambitious. And here we really see that data is key, because that helps us to know where we put that definition. And of course, it also is super inspiring for whoever along the value chain. It could be the architects, but definitely also the entrepreneurs. How can we get closer to there are many kind of footprints. We could focus on carbon, but in Denmark and some of the other Nordic countries focus on resources. The virgin resources are very rare, so we want to focus on them as well. So this is the overview. I know it's quite a wild slide, but at least it gives the message that we have the long-term stepwise policy goals, and the implementation is happening. Just the last one, we're from everywhere around the world, but in Europe, the European Commission have just put forward their Energy Performance of Building Directive, which says that by 2027, all EU member states should make a roadmap. 2028, it should be starting to be implemented. And then by 2030, you have to make those limits. So it's really good that we have this time to train and to get the capacity and learn from each other. And that's also why we have the Nordic program, so that we can learn from each other and accelerate our knowledge. And I'm here today to be able to share it. And of course, I'm gaining a lot of super cool inspiration that I will bring home. So we talked a lot about it, and I think most of you know it, but so these are the LCAs. And so when you put a limit, it really matters what was included. And right now, you're really only seeing the icing of the cake. There are so many details underneath, and I think many of you know, but at least it's important, of course, what part of the value chain do you include? So what you see, of course, so this is the phases of the construction. As we want to focus on it, it aligns to the standard that aligns to the Energy Performance of Building Directive in the EU. And here the dark blue shows what phases are currently regulation, and the light blue shows what is, it's policies. So it's predicted or planned or maybe to be integrated. And then we will see if we will once reach towards levels, which is the European perspective. There's a lot of details underneath. So what we have seen in the Nordic countries is that when you put a limit value, and if you strengthen it quite rapidly, that demands fast innovation and new ways of collaborating. Sometimes it's kind of easy focusing on a product, but what we really see is that it's a lot about the collaboration. As you mentioned, the sufficiency. How can we actually think different of how we construct? And there we need the data, and hopefully one day the artificial energy or artificial intelligence to tell us how can we actually build in a better way that just uses less resources. One thing we're a little bit we consider it quite clearly is how fast can we move, because there are practitioners out there who have to implement the regulation. And if we have very ambitious limit value, suddenly you really need to change fast. And as regulators, it's not only climate. Those demands have to balance really nicely with, as you said so nicely, you should be as interested in your building as in food ingredients. But it has to balance health, safety. You don't want fire and a lot of people dying. And also indoor climate. I don't know how much you love hearing your neighbor, but there are these different things. You could call it sound, or some call it noise. But we have to balance all of that. And when you then put climate on top, they don't just align. We're used that we can just put more on top. But that's not the case. So there's a lot of innovation needed, and we need to see how we can build on it. So this slide, and I'm doing it's the drumming. It's a launch. And that doesn't work in this one. So in the Nordic program, we do a lot of different things, and I just mentioned a tiny bit here, but another thing we do on a totally different scale, but where I think a lot of innovation and a lot of real things come from, is the vocational training, those who are constructing. So today, right now, at a global level, we launched this, Skills for Reuse, And it really is teaching materials for vocational schools that is open source. There's a lot in the Nordic language and then also in English at least. It's really training, and it focuses on wood and brick. And there you as a teacher can use it, or it doesn't only have to be vocational schools, it could be practitioners as well. And it has everything from sustainability to design for disassemble and many of the considerations you have to go through. What do you call it? Dangerous or hazard substance, because we really want to promote, you can say reuse, but also just using what is there. But there you really have to be concerned about health. So that was a launch. You're most welcome to look at it, and please share it if you know someone who might find it useful. Today also, there's another launch, this report that gives you a fresh overview of the Nordic policies, and these are some of the places where you can find more information on it. Thank you.
Okay, it's me. Just moving. No, this is the green. Okay. Now I'm back. So it starts here. So I'm going to talk about how to make CO2 reporting really, really easy, really, really meaningful, and really, really cheap. So the Brazilian government has this decision to implement some CO2 goals in construction in some time, and they asked us to imagine something that will mean something in the market. It will drive the CO2 of the construction market down, not only from the buildings. I will show you later. 70% of our building materials are used in somehow informal construction. So the only way to touch this sector is to put pressure on the building material producers. So the idea is, how can you do that? So traditional LCA or EPD was not an option, too expensive. Knowledge gap is huge. We have quite a lot PhD trained on LCA, but they are PhDs, and it's not really practical. It's very slow to implement. We have a national database on LCA started 20 years ago, and so far got I think 15 data sets that are Brazilian. Took the United States, I don't know how many decades to have a national database. It's very complex, requires many service providers, and it's not really feasible for small and medium organizations. And is the most of the construction sector are small and medium organizations, and the building materials as well. We don't like the need for secondary data. Now, traditional EPD is ridden with secondary data. I feel really strange that a company director signs on the declaration saying that I emitted that amount of CO2, or I don't know, something that it doesn't control and doesn't measure. It's just fished in a database. So we didn't think this was good. It's not a good engineering practice. I'm not talking about scientific procedures. This is not really good. So we decided it's not the way to go. So I'm having problems with this. So what we did was develop what we call CDAC, is Environmental Performance Database, is a LCA database, traditional. Everything on the life cycle is there. But it's two information only today, CO2 and energy. And it's just CO2, it's not global warming potential. CO2 is 97% of problem of construction in Brazil. And too much work to inventory 3%, so it's CO2. It's very easy to learn. My mother's understand it because she, it's very simple because it's easy. We can teach and show people in a very simple way, and it's fast to deploy. We are already tested in 30 small companies. We trained the staff to do the inventory, and then we went after that and check for the data, and it works. It's evolutive. We are focusing on to the gate, and then we are going to go to next year the use phase. We already have money to do the use phase, to integrate with the energy use in the use phase. We have something very different. So your scope 1 and scope 2 is mandatory to be primary data. So in your company, what is your emission, you have to measure and you have to control. And finally, if you use secondary data, the uncertainty will be explicit. If you have a secondary data, you are going to not have a number, you are going to have a range, and that's final. And it is really, really simple, and I think another factor that attract me for that is it is one fully digital platform. Everything is there, the eco-invent, so to say, all the inventory tools, the data validation tool. In the end, the company will have a digital EPD. The EPD will be in the national database. It's not in a database. It's not a PDF. If the guy wants a PDF, okay, he just asks for a PDF, but it's going to be in our national database. And the database, as it has been built to exchange data using IFCs. You can input your inventory using IFC, and we are trying to do some kind of IFC to collect data from company management softwares. So that's the idea is everything is digital. Nobody will have to work in inventory. The data is there in some computer. Just put it inside of the database. These are the stakeholders. It's a Brazilian federal government. We got money from EU, this PIPA project. GSET from Germany. Well, BPEI was partner of the project, and we have other organizations in Brazil. Now we are working on a benchmark for building structures. Was mentioned before. Building structures are like 60–70% of the embodied carbon, and we use like 5 materials. And we have really, really good guys, the engineering people that do design. They are really not so many, and they are really capable. And the softwares, they are compatible with IFCs. So we are doing a database that is going to collect data directly from the design softwares. We have 97% of the softwares committed with our initiative. It's going to be on the fly very, very fast. I hope in the future we are going to collect enough data to do evidence-based CO2 mitigation roadmap and targets, and hopefully pricing. We are discussing this kind of thing in Brazil. We want to increase the indicators to include resource use, water, and waste, and among other things. One last thing, and this is kind of the elephant in the room. So 70% of building materials in Brazil goes to not only informal houses like that, that's a favela, it's self-help housing, but middle-class houses where you have an architect perhaps, maybe not, maybe engineer, and home builder that is not really, really trained. We don't really have design for that. It's some drawings to get an approval from the city council, and let's do it. So this is 70%. So how can we touch this kind of sector? And this is not only for Brazil. I can say Latin America. I think Africa is more or less India, for sure. So we are discussing here probably 40% of construction. And we need to imagine things for this 60–70% that is a kind of informal. We are starting a project on that in Brazil, and we want to have partnership. We're trying to thinking for zero on that stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think that was an excellent presentation. Can I start with sharing a bad dream I had? I'm at 5:20 p.m., nobody in the room, I'm presenting to myself. The building staff show up, they say, we're going to lock the building if you don't leave. So thank you for staying. Thank you for coming. Don't leave till my presentation is over. So my name is Anil Sahani. Thank you to the organizers. We are co-organizers also. So for this session, I think the amount of variation in sharing of knowledge is amazing. I work for RICS. RICS has 135,000 members. So Kelly, 2,000 is a small number. 135,000 members and their mothers, apparently, can be, we can train them. And just to the point on, we are talking about formal, informal buildings. This is infrastructure also. So, and that takes a big chunk of emissions as well. So we got to do something about infra also. So sorry for that. Maybe it brought you back from your sleep. I was asked. It's a bit sticky. Okay. So I was asked to address this prompt on the research and innovation need for whole life carbon assessment. And remember, this is just one layer, because on top of this layer, you can add social outcomes, economic outcomes, and many other things that you can talk about. So we just very basic level of research and innovation required to get whole life carbon assessment moving in the right direction. There are three pillars, I think, when we talk about research and innovation: standards and methodology of how we calculate carbon. You know, there is a methodology similar to calculate cost for our buildings, but if you make a mistake, the internal stakeholders are going to suffer. Okay, you're going to lose money, and so on and so forth. But in this case, if we don't use a methodology that is consistent, we may end up getting impact on everyone else, because maybe we are not even meeting our targets. If we have 10% waste on a construction site, by some calculations, and I think an Autodesk study as well, 30%, up to 30% wastage. Are we not throwing away embodied carbon? So this is something that we need to think in terms of standards and methodology, data and digital solutions, which we got an excellent overview of today. And also we need to talk about capacity building. And Kelly, you're absolutely right. That is probably the most important part. So within that framework, if you look at things, we need to work on methodology, targets, benchmarks. We need to revise our regulatory and procurement regime. We need to think in terms of also research on low carbon materials. Our universities and researchers need to think around those, and maybe some of those can be supplied to informal construction so that we begin from a better starting point. I know it's easier said than done. Invest in low carbon economy and infrastructure, because we need to decarbonize the grid, decarbonize the material production itself. We need to think about integrating decarbonization workflow into our core workflows. It should not be a standalone workflow where I know very architects who are practicing this treat it as their core workflow, but I don't think it really happens in our sector that way. It's a special thing that we do, one-off a thing, which is not integrated to industry foundation classes or BIM and so on and so forth. We need to make LCA and carbon calculation tools easily available. I know EC3, for example, is freely available for data for certain countries is high, so use those kind of calculators. Develop and adopt international reporting standards, because if we don't report, we won't be able to, in the same way, in a consistent way, we will not be able to benchmark. As the chair of the International Cost Management Standard, I can tell you that we have produced a taxonomy freely available, open source, that you can use to at least report at level 2, level 3 of that detail, both cost and carbon. So we need to start integrating cost and carbon as well, create national databases for emissions. We are building one for the UK called the Built Environment Carbon Database. Again, open source, freely available. You can even take the architecture of our database and deploy it in your nation. And then measure, validate, learn, improve, and I think share. So what have we done? What we did is last year we released the second edition of our whole life carbon assessment professional standard. It was first launched in 2017. We have updated it. One main thing that we have done is it includes 18 different infrastructure assets. So you can do WLCA calculations for all building types, obviously, but also infrastructure, from road all the way up to process plants and so on. This methodology, open source, freely available from our website, downloadable and implementable. And many of the software that I think Moses listed on his slide are compliant to our standard, and they're trying to update to our second edition by July 1, 2024, when our standard becomes effective. So the methodology needs to be consistent, practical, needs to be integrated to our existing workflows, aligned to cost systems also, because I think we are living in a fancy world if we think cost is not going to play a role in low carbon decisions. Data-driven, EPDs, open EPDs, carbon cost and benefits. So just not look at embodied carbon, look at trade-off between embodied and operational also alongside cost. And then integrate our methodology with carbon management standards like in the UK, PAS 2080, which tells you how to manage carbon on your assets and portfolios and projects. I know time is limited, so I'm going to sort of speed up. Alongside our standard, we launched yesterday 4 freely available guides to help clients. They don't need to know how to do WLCA. I didn't tell you, this is a secret. Our professional standard is about 220 pages. Okay, so we don't want clients to read that. Perhaps they need to read the client guide and see how do you get the WLCA done on your projects and assets. We have created a global harmonization framework. Today and yesterday, some of the workshops I attended, standards are a bit of a tricky word to use because everybody says, I don't want to use your standard, I have my own standard. So we said, fine, we're going to produce high-level principles that you can utilize to say at least the methodology is consistent. Because if we compare incorrectly, I think we will be heading in the wrong direction. We have created a national playbook for implementation by countries where WLCA ecosystems are not in existence or require further strengthening. We have created a capacity building playbook that countries can adopt to create a training program. We also offer ICMS, we are offering 2 training programs starting next week, 3-part web class on WLCA, and 7-module WLCA training. We provide reporting structure of ICMS 3 that can be freely downloaded, and we also have worked with some benchmarking initiatives like BECD, UK Net Zero Carbon Building, and so on. So our systems, the ecosystem that we have available to our members and non-members is consistent with what's going on outside of the UK as well. So these are the 7 harmonization principles that we have released yesterday, which will essentially ensure that even if you're using your own standard, disclose what kind of data you're using, what kind of uncertainty modeling you're using, as you can see in the harmonization principle 6. Some systems like EC3 have an uplift factor of 10 to 20%. So if I'm doing calculations and I apply uplift factor of 10%, and somebody is doing embodied carbon calculation in Excel, and they don't apply that, it's going to be a pretty big imbalance and disincentive to use proper methodologies. So these reporting principles are there for the industry to adopt, to anyone who has their own standard, to at least disclose or share how these principles are addressed in that standard or in that methodology. So we are hoping with this release, we can bring harmonization of WLCA calculations also. I think that was pretty much it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anil. we're a couple minutes over time due to some slide glitches. I hope that you don't mind if I keep you for just a couple more minutes, because it would be an injustice to some of the experience of our speakers if we just closed the presentations and ran. I will be brief, but I think that we have a lot to learn from the experiences here. Helle, I wanted to ask you specifically about how to manage potential trade-offs between the depth of accuracy or the scope of assessment and ensuring simplicity and accessibility. We've heard we need things to be simple, we need to start somewhere, but we can't have data that's false. And so how did you get started? What would your recommendations be to anyone else in your position trying to achieve what you've achieved?
Thank you. I think it's a great field. You see how all this information and knowledge is there, and all across the globe, it's really booming. So I think where we started, it will be easier to get the data. But we actually, at least in Denmark, started with 60 cases.
Wow.
That's where we built our information on, and it's really like digging down and really working hard to get information on that. So that's where we built the first limit value on. And now I don't remember exactly, but it's like 263 cases. We're counting. But you need those kind of specific data. And what we see with those data is that one of the recommendations in the report I showed is that when you do make a limit value, the first ones we have in Denmark, it's just for every building that's over 1,000 square meters. But now we really recommend that new results shows us that it really makes sense to differentiate your limit value, because for some, of course, constructions it's easier to reach than others. So if you really want to get that motivation factor, you need to differentiate. So just start, use the good forces. I guess that's also why I asked Moses before, like, where are the front runners? I think some of the cities across the Nordic countries have really shown us the way. Many of you talk about the certification schemes. Some would tell the story that it started a lot with that. Others would say that the industry really wanted it and they saw that this is the path. So across the Nordic countries, I would say all the industries either have they call it different things, but it's the same roadmap, think tank, it's the same. But everyone is really involving the industry. And I think they have a lot of good solutions. So use the special forces you have there. And I really enjoyed both of your presentations. But the point you have with like the 70% building informally, how can we do something that's simple but works in the real life? And I think that's a super interesting opportunity.
And that maybe brings me to my next question.
Perfect.
And Vanderlei, I see that you're still working on the problem. You might not have all the answers, but this is a massive opportunity, the informal construction sector. And how can we bring LCA to the reality on the ground now? We can't change reality, so how do we work with it?
I think we have to focus on our goal. Our goal is to decarbonize. And in the informal construction, people, they take 10 years, 20 years to build a house. They build a small shack in the beginning, then they put a concrete floor, and then they make 2 walls in bricks, and the rest still wood, etc. So these people are trying to survive. They don't do any calculation except I can afford that, I have that. So my way of thinking is they use construction materials that are made by companies. If we cannot touch the client, we have to put the pressure on the building material producers. This is one thing. The other thing is Brazil is aging. In 2035, we are going to start to shrink the population. And old people cannot do bricklaying. Right, so building self-help housing has to evolve, because I don't think we're going to get rid of all the poors. There are too many, and there is not so much money on that, and not political will in the country, I think. Very sad about that, but that's the reality. So I really think that what we are aiming now is to understand how people build, how they decide what kind of technology they use, and we want to feed the industry, the building materials industry, with low carbon ideas, of low carbon opportunities. So we're trying, we really don't know how these houses are built. I have pictures. But nobody really knows how much cement or CO2 there is in a low-cost housing in Brazil. Nobody, I mean, because we don't know. We don't study that. We work for building contractors. We work with architectural offices. We don't do research with poor people. So that's what we are going to move. But I think this is major worldwide. It's major problem worldwide. We should address that also. And from EPDs, someone mentioned in the previous session a reduction by a factor of 10 of a cost of a EPD. I think we are doing a factor of 40 with our system in Brazil, the cost of EPD. It's going to be very, very cheap.
Thank you. And finally, for Anil, you're really the world leader, I think, in so much of the certification schemes. Now, how do you create the capacity? What's your experience? I mean, we know your experience, but maybe very practically, how do you create the urgency for upskilling?
So I think a couple of things, if I may. First is a real example. And some of you may already know this. New York is going to have what's called a local law 97. By 2025, I may be getting the numbers wrong, but you can go Google it. New York LL 97. By 2025, buildings over 25,000 square feet, again, I may be making up these numbers, will be meeting a benchmark. And if you don't meet a benchmark, there'll be a penalty, which then the Real Estate Association of New York, this is a public report, you can search and find it, estimated that just in Manhattan, the number of buildings that will be non-compliant, the investors, the owners, and actually there are multifamily housing also, right? They'll start losing close to $700 million a year if the retrofits and changes are not made to meet the benchmark. So I think that, I assume all of you will agree, that will create a sense of urgency. But I guess the first reaction is that the industry is saying, oh, this is too much, you have to delay, and so on. But I think there's going to be a time when there will be real penalty to not meet some of these targets and benchmarks, at least in bigger cities, and hopefully then the sense of urgency would spread. The second point I want to make is, and this is something I keep hearing, is who will pay for the EPDs? Now, if you walk into a grocery store, do you see nutrition labels only on organic food and not on regular food? No, it's across the board, and nobody's asking. It's maybe somehow built into the cost of what you're buying. So can that be applied? And EPDs are required whether you are low carbon or whatever else standard stuff there is. So I think that will create sense of urgency in getting the data there. And data in that form should be machine readable. It should not be PDF. So there is already, I think, Building Transparency has an open EPD schema that can be used. There is an ISO 22057 standard that talks about product data templates and EPDs and how they will work in BIM. So I think the infrastructure is there, and that sense of urgency hopefully will come soon. As to RICS, we are trying to promote standards, standard methodologies, training, but we want to partner and work with all of you to deliver some of these things. Firstly, for our members, because our members, starting July 1, 2024, will be regulated against the whole life carbon assessment professional standard. So if you do WLCAs, it is your duty to show that you're compliant with that standard, or you have to write why is it not compliant. So I think those kinds of things hopefully will work and move us in the right direction.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's hard to summarize the diverse basket of lessons learned we've had from our speakers. I'll try to summarize a few things very briefly, but I think a lot of it is repetition from what we've heard today, but maybe repetition isn't such a bad thing. I think it's necessary. I think the Nordic experience clearly shows us that the introduction of strict whole life carbon limit values can incentivize a market, and you can build incredible things from starting there. I think it shows the importance of having a strong policy framework strong leadership at the national level. But we can only manage what we measure. We need high quality primary data to get into the hands of architects, to get into the hands of practitioners as well as, and in the hands of policymakers, as you said. I think the opportunity to address our sustainability commitments and decarbonize the built environment must also leverage technology. That's, for me, also one of the big takeaways of this panel. And, well, I think some of the knowledge gaps that were mentioned, I think were very clear. The capacity building, creating carbon literacy is huge. Focusing more on how to decarbonize the informal construction sector. It came up this morning. I'm sure it's come up in several panels and we've just discussed it now. But this is clearly an area where strong action is needed, as well as we know in Europe, this was mentioned before, but again, decarbonizing the existing stock is going to be harder and harder for all of us, or more of a challenge that we have to focus on. So we know what we have to focus on. And I think we have evidence that there are many, many solutions. We all know that time is limited, but I heard someone say this yesterday in a cocktail, and I'm going to borrow her phrase, radical collaboration is how to get the job done between academia, industry, and policymakers. And I'm really heartened to see all the collaboration that's already been going on, and I think everyone in the room probably feels the same. And everyone also probably wants to have a drink, so I think we can further discuss our inspiration and our stories, because there's, I think, another session, a closing networking activity now. So thank you all so much, and please give a big round of applause to our speakers.
Yeah, we should take a picture.